Well, my goodness, the Indiana Fever pulled it off. Defeated the Las Vegas Aces.
Something wild just happened in the WNBA, and nobody saw it coming. The Las Vegas Aces, led by the seemingly unstoppable A'ja Wilson, walked into that arena like queens ready to dominate. But what they didn't expect was Sophie Cunningham, stepping onto the court like she had a personal score to settle. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement that rattled the league, shook the Aces' confidence, and flipped the script on what fans thought they knew about the Indiana Fever.
Sophie, another big game, 4 or 5, 3 or 4 from three-point range, 15 points tonight.
With Caitlin Clark sidelined and critics already counting them out, Sophie rose from the shadows and delivered a performance so bold, so defiant, it felt like she was daring the entire WNBA to underestimate her again. And here's the kicker, this wasn't just about buckets. This was about heart, anger, and being ignored for too long. What Sophie did out there, it changed everything.
The WNBA ignores and then makes foul calls like this on Sophie Cunningham. It was ridiculous.
Second, take a
look at this. They going to call a foul on that. I mean, on that. What are we doing? The phantom touch? Is that what we're doing?
It wasn't Sophie Cunningham who made the first noise of the night. It was her coach, Stephanie White. Normally, the composed, stone-faced leader of the Indiana Fever erupted on the sidelines with a fire we haven't seen all season. After months of robotic post-game interviews and calm shrugs in the face of terrible officiating, White finally lost it.
When it comes to the momentum swings and getting too high, too low, and allowing things to snowball, I guess, just as a coach, is there anything you can do to try and stifle that or control that, or is that something that it's largely up to the players to kind of sort through and figure out themselves?
Yeah, I mean, we coaches, we can't control that. We can't control anything like that. I mean, the biggest thing is just reiterate to them to stay neutral.
She got slapped with a technical screamed, "That's bullshit," at the refs, and stormed the court like she was ready to suit up herself. It was raw, it was emotional, and it was long overdue. The question is, why now? This wasn't a playoff game. It wasn't a finals rematch. This was a midseason matchup against a stacked Aces squad that everyone expected the Fever to lose. But somewhere in that boiling point moment, it became clear. Stephanie White had enough. Enough of the disrespect. Enough of watching her team, especially Sophie Cunningham, get battered, ignored, and overlooked. Let's not pretend this was just about a bad call. Bad calls have been happening all year. Caitlin Clark has been body-checked without whistles. Sophie has been shoved to the floor with zero reaction from refs. The difference? This time, the Fever were winning. This time, the underdogs were biting back. And maybe White realized the only way her team's voice would be heard was if she raised hell. That fire lit a fuse under the entire roster. You could feel the shift in energy. Sophie Cunningham already having a strong game turned relentless. Ari McDonald started draining threes like she had something to prove. Natasha Howard became a one-woman wrecking crew in the paint, and the crowd electrified. Not because they saw a technical foul, but because for the first time, their coach acted like this game mattered as much to her as it did to them. Stephanie White's outburst wasn't just a flash of anger. It was a message to her players. Fight harder. To the refs, we see your bias. And to the league, don't you dare ignore us anymore. You could see it in Sophie's face when she sank that deep three. This wasn't just a win, they were reclaiming control of the narrative. With Caitlin Clark on the bench in street clothes, someone had to carry the torch. White lit it. Sophie ran with it. But the most important takeaway, Stephanie White picked the perfect moment to explode. Because what happened after that outburst proved one thing. This team isn't dead. Not by a long shot. And if you think this fire was a one-time thing, think again. What came next on the court was a storm, one that A'ja Wilson and the Aces never saw coming, because Sophie Cunningham wasn't just hot, she was surgical. And what she did in the next quarter, that's where the story truly ignites. Once Stephanie White lit the match, Sophie Cunningham became the wildfire. You could feel it the second she got that handoff at the top of the arc. No hesitation, no wasted movement. Just a quick release, pure rotation, and a splash from way beyond. The three-point line. That shot didn't just put points on the board, it silenced an entire Las Vegas bench that had been chirping all night. And Sophie wasn't done. She kept moving without the ball, slipping through screens, cutting with purpose, and demanding attention. The aces tried to adjust. Didn't matter, hand in her face. She drilled it. Double team? She passed out and relocated, then drained another one seconds later. The kind of rhythm she found isn't taught. It's born out of pure confidence and months of being overlooked. Because, let's be real, Sophie Cunningham has been treated like an afterthought in the WNBA narrative this season. All the headlines are about rookies, rivalries, and viral moments. But here was Sophie, turning a nationally televised game into her own personal mixtape. And who was on the receiving end of that destruction? None other than A'ja Wilson, the face of the Aces, and one of the most dominant players in the league. But Sophie didn't flinch. Every time A'ja made a move, Sophie answered. Not with blocks or stops, Sophie played her own game. She didn't need to shut A'ja down. She just had to make sure her own presence was louder. That's exactly what she did. In just a few minutes of third-quarter madness, Sophie racked up points with ruthless efficiency. 4 of 5 from the field, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. 15 points before Vegas even realized they needed to rotate faster. It wasn't just about the numbers, it was how she got them. Confident pull-ups, smart spacing, ice-cold threes from deep. Every possession screamed, "You forgot about me. That was your mistake." Meanwhile, the Aces, normally composed, disciplined, and confident, started unraveling. Their defensive rotations got sloppy. Their shot selection turned desperate. And worst of all, they looked shook because they weren't just dealing with a hot shooter, they were dealing with a player on a mission. Sophie wasn't just making shots, she was making a statement. And what was that statement? I'm still here, and I'm not playing nice anymore. By the time the quarter ended, Sophie had torched the Aces. Defensive schemes so thoroughly that even commentators were calling it her career-defining moment. And maybe it was. Because this wasn't a fluke, this wasn't luck. This was years of being underestimated, boiling over into one unstoppable stretch of basketball. But here's the thing, Sophie didn't do it alone. What happened next showed that when she leads, the entire team follows. And one player in particular. She hit the dagger that buried the Aces for good. Keep watching. It gets even better. Just when Vegas thought they had weathered the storm, Sophie Cunningham unleashed. Aari McDonald stepped in and shut the door completely. The Aces had clawed their way back within 5 points. Momentum was swinging. You could feel the nervous energy from Fever fans creeping in, and even the commentators hinted that a comeback might be brewing. But Aari McDonald had other plans, and she made it very clear with one ice-cold back-breaking shot from way downtown that ended the conversation. Let's rewind a moment. Aari had been quietly cooking all game. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't pounding her chest or calling for the spotlight. But every time she touched the ball, she made smart decisions. Her threes, pure. Her passes, crisp. And when Vegas tried to collapse on her drives, she didn't force it. She just pulled up and splashed it. But what makes Aari's dagger so satisfying is how timely it was. With just under a minute left on the clock, the Fever were clinging to a 2-possession lead. The Aces were pressing hard, rotating faster, trying to trap. McDonald got the ball, calmly dribbled to her spot, and with no hesitation, pulled up from way beyond the arc. Swish, game over. That one shot didn't just push the lead, it pushed Vegas into full-blown panic mode. You could see it in their body. Language, shoulders slumped, eyes darting. That's the thing about a well-timed dagger. It doesn't just hurt the scoreboard, it hurts the soul. And Aari delivered it like a sniper. No celebration, no theatrics. Just a quiet walk back on defense while the arena exploded around her. And let's be clear, this wasn't luck. Aari McDonald has been clutch her entire career. From college deep into her pro run, she's built a reputation for showing up when the lights are brightest. But in a Fever jersey, surrounded by bigger names and louder narratives, it's easy for fans to overlook her. Not anymore. That one shot didn't just seal the game. It reminded everyone that this team is more than just one name or one storyline. Caitlin Clark may be the face on the billboards, but when she's out, Aari McDonald is more than capable of being the closer. And she did it with composure that looked eerily similar to the veterans who usually dominate these moments. The impact of that shot rippled through the team. Suddenly, every Fever player played freer. Natasha Howard crashed the boards harder. Sophie started laughing on the bench, knowing the wind was in hand, and Stephanie White. She looked calm again, not because she didn't care, but because she knew her team had grown up right in front of her. That dagger didn't just end a game, it marked a shift in confidence, in chemistry, in belief. And while Vegas scrambled for answers, one of their biggest problems was standing wide open and being ignored again. That player, Sophie Cunningham, and her role in this story still isn't finished. Even with the game in hand, there was one thing that kept poking at viewers like a splinter under the skin. How many times Sophie Cunningham was left wide open and still didn't get the ball. It wasn't a fluke, it wasn't once or twice. This happened repeatedly throughout the game. Sophie would slip into perfect position beyond the arc. Her defender a full step behind, hands ready, feet set. And yet, nothing. The ball never came. Players drove recklessly into the paint, threw up wild shots with two defenders hanging on them, while Sophie stood there like a forgotten weapon, loaded and locked, but never fired. It makes you wonder why this is a player who had already hit multiple threes with surgical precision. She was hot, efficient, focused, and yet it felt like her own teammates either didn't see her or chose not to see her. That's not just bad basketball IQ, that's a red flag. Because when a shooter is that dialed in, the offense should flow through them. Plain and simple. You feed the hand that's hot, especially when the defense has no answer for her spacing. Sophie wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't ball hogging or waving her arms in frustration. She just kept moving, finding the soft spots in Vegas defense, and trusting the system to reward her positioning. It didn't, and that's what makes her earlier eruption so impressive. She managed to dominate a quarter without being the focal point of the offense. She created momentum without consistent touches. That's not just talent, that's mental toughness. But here's the bigger issue. It's not the first time this has happened. Fans have noticed it in previous games. Sophie gets hot, then gets iced by her own team. Whether it's oversight, favoritism, or poor playmaking, it's a pattern that's starting to raise questions. And when you're already battling media bias, officiating issues, and league politics, the last thing you should be fighting is your own team's trust. You could feel the tension each time. Sophie was overlooked. The bench would shift uncomfortably. The crowd would groan. Even commentators called it out, noting how odd it was to see a player shooting nearly perfect from deep and still not being fed the ball. This wasn't just about missing a scoring opportunity, it was about missed respect. Sophie has put in the work. She's stepped up when others shrank. She's proven she can take over. And yet, in crucial moments, she's still treated like a secondary option. That needs to change. Because if the Fever truly want to evolve into a playoff caliber team, they can't keep sidelining one of their most consistent weapons. Sophie doesn't need special treatment. She just needs the ball when she's open. And until that shift happens, the Fever will always be fighting against themselves, no matter who's on the other side of the court. What happens next? Let's just say the refs got involved and things went sideways fast. Just when the Indiana Fever started to build real momentum, the referees decided to insert themselves into the storyline. And like clockwork, it was a disaster. Not for the Aces, for the Fever. If you watched closely, you saw it happening in real-time ticky-tack calls on clean contests, phantom fouls on minimal contact. Sophie Cunningham, who had just caught fire and was playing with controlled aggression, got whistled for barely brushing a Vegas player. Meanwhile, on the other end, Aja Wilson and company were throwing elbows, bodying defenders, and getting every whistle their way. It wasn't just lopsided, it was blatant. At one point, Sophie got clipped hard on a drive no call. Seconds later, she gets whistled for what looked like air. It was the kind of inconsistency that kills flow and deflates effort. And let's be honest, it's not the first time this season we've seen it. The Fever aren't just battling tough opponents. They're battling the officials every single night. What's worse is how predictable it's become. Whenever the Fever start to threaten a powerhouse team like Vegas, the game suddenly slows down and the whistles start flying in one direction. It's as if the league wants to preserve its stars at the expense of balance. And yet, the Fever didn't fold. Sophie Cunningham, despite being clearly frustrated, stayed locked in. She kept her composure. No flailing arms, no pleading. Looks, just grit. And that's what made the one ridiculous foul call against her so infuriating. On a routine play, barely a bump, the ref blew the whistle like Sophie had committed a flagrant. The commentators even paused in disbelief. Fans on social media were furious, calling out the WWE-style officiating, saying it felt more like a scripted outcome than a fair contest. And here's the irony. The more the refs tried to hand the game back to the Aces, the more it revealed how much power Sophie had taken from them earlier, because even the league's darlings couldn't erase what she had already done. The scoreboard still showed the Fever in the lead. The Aces still looked rattled, and the fans, especially those watching closely, started to question what they were seeing. The refs didn't just blow calls, they exposed the double standard. Aja Wilson gets tapped free throws, Sophie gets clobbered play on. It's a pattern that doesn't just affect the outcome of one game, it affects the legitimacy of the product. And if the WNBA wants fans to take its growth seriously, it can't keep pretending this isn't happening. But the best part, the Fever still. Despite all of it, despite the calls, the imbalance, the bias, Sophie, Ari, and the crew held their ground and walked away with the W. And in doing so, they sent a message louder than any whistle. We don't need favors. Just give us the ball and get out of the way. And as we shift to the aftermath, one question lingers: why does the league keep silencing its grittiest stars? Let's dig into that next. Sophie Cunningham just torched one of the WNBA's top teams, played her heart out, and helped deliver a statement. When so, where's the spotlight? That's the question fans are asking, and it's not new. Game after game, Sophie shows up, puts in work, and then gets swept under the rug while the narrative fixates on flashier names. She's not on the league's highlight reels, she's not getting post-game interviews, and when her name does come up, it's usually buried beneath discussions about rookies, rivalries, or a flashy dunk that didn't actually change the outcome of a game. It's not just disrespectful, it's strategic. The WNBA has made it clear who they want to market. It's a short list, and Sophie's not on it. But why? Let's start with the obvious. Sophie doesn't fit the mold the league is pushing. She's not flashy. She's not constantly online doing brand deals or posing for magazine covers. She doesn't play politics. She plays basketball, and in a media landscape more focused on storylines than stat sheets. That makes her invisible even when she's the best player on the court. There's also the issue of narrative control. The league has spent this season hyping up a few key rivalries: Aja versus Caitlin, rookies versus vets, East versus West. Sophie, by contrast, doesn't play into that. She's not controversial enough to trend, but not quiet enough to ignore. She's in that dangerous middle zone, productive, passionate, and brutally honest. And sometimes, that's exactly what gets you erased. Then there's the team dynamic. With Caitlin Clark on the roster, the Fever have become the most scrutinized team in the league. Every storyline revolves around her even when she's not on the floor. And while Clark absolutely deserves credit for what she brings to the game, it's also created a shadow that swallows up players like Sophie Cunningham. When Sophie has a breakout performance, the headlines still find a way to mention Clark. When Sophie hits clutch threes, commentators shift the focus back to how the team will adjust once Clark returns. It's like no one knows how to talk about the Fever without bringing up Caitlin, even when she's in street clothes. But here's the truth. Sophie isn't asking for special treatment. She just wants her respect. She wants the same recognition anyone else would get for dropping 15 points in a quarter, knocking down key threes, and doing it with flawless efficiency. That's not ego, that's earned. The fans see it, the players know it. Even the opponents feel it when they have to guard her. So why does the league still look the other way? Maybe it's fear. Because if they truly gave Sophie Cunningham her flowers, they'd have to admit their narrative is broken. That greatness doesn't always come with a camera crew or a shoe deal. And the longer they ignore her, the more powerful she becomes, because when the spotlight misses you, but you still shine, that's when the world starts to notice. The next section, it's where the fire turns into fuel. Sophie Cunningham isn't screaming for attention. She's not calling out the league on social media or demanding her face on banners. But make no mistakes, she's fighting a war, a quiet, relentless war for respect. And every missed headline, every ignored stat line, every wide-open shot that doesn't come her way only adds to the fire that fuels her. That's what makes her rise. So dangerous because unlike players who chase spotlight first and performance second, Sophie's doing the opposite. She's building her legacy in silence, one efficient bucket, one gritty rebound, one ignored whistle at a time. And eventually, that silence becomes too loud to ignore. This game against the Aces, it wasn't just a win, it was a warning shot. A message wrapped in three-pointers and hard-nosed defense, the kind of performance that forces everyone, fans, analysts, coaches, to look twice and say, wait, how did we miss this? And still, she doesn't gloat. No theatrics, no look at me antics. She just shows up, works, and delivers. Again and again and again. But here's the secret that the league hasn't figured out. Yet players like Sophie are the foundation, the glue, the ones who make star systems work, who sacrifice the spotlight to create space for others. And when you keep ignoring players like that, eventually they stop supporting your system and start building their own. Quietly happening now. You can see it in the way Fever fans are shifting. They're not just watching for Caitlin Clark anymore. They're noticing who actually shows up every night, who plays through contact, who's consistent when the cameras aren't rolling. And Sophie is at the center of that shift. You can feel it in the locker room too. Her teammates are starting to look to her when things get tense. She's becoming the emotional compass of a team that desperately needs balance between hype and grit, and the league. They're missing the story. They're so busy scripting drama and marketing stars that they're overlooking the organic rise of a player who doesn't fit the mold, but breaks it anyway. A player who's not just surviving the system, she's slowly bending it in her favor. Because when Sophie plays like this and still gets ignored, it becomes a rallying cry, not just for her, but for every underrated player grinding in her shadow. It says, you don't need their spotlight, you make your own. That's the war she's fighting. Not with words, not with headlines, with results. And whether the league wants to acknowledge it or not, the fans are already catching on. Sophie isn't a side character in someone else's story. She's been writing her own chapter this whole time. And if this game was any indication, that chapter is just getting started. The final piece of this puzzle, what this means for the Fever and how far they can actually go if they finally start playing through Sophie. Let's close it out. The Indiana Fever have been trying to figure out their identity all season. Are they Caitlin Clark's team? Are they building around Aaliyah Boston's inside presence? Is Kelsey Mitchell the go-to scorer? Or is this still a revolving door of role players trying to fit together? But after this game, a new truth is staring everyone in the face. The engine that sparked their most complete, confident, and aggressive performance didn't come from any of the names on the promotional posters. It came from Sophie Cunningham. The irony, she's not even treated like a core piece of the puzzle. Not yet. But if the Fever want to build something sustainable, something more than hype, more than flashes of brilliance, they need to start seeing Sophie not as a role player, but as a foundational piece. A glue player, yes, but also a shot creator, a spark plug, a tone setter, the kind of player who doesn't wait for the moment, she becomes the moment. Look at what happened when she was empowered, even slightly. 15 points on 5 shots. Unshakable confidence, relentless off-ball movement, and most importantly, leadership without ego. That's what young teams like the Fever need more than anything. Someone who brings urgency without chaos, fire without panic. Sophie has that, and she's earned the right to be trusted with more than just spot-up threes and backup minutes. The problem is, systems don't always change overnight. Too often, franchises get locked into the player they want someone to become rather than seeing who that player actually is in the moment. And right now, Sophie is the most game-ready piece on the board, not named Caitlin Clark. She's already adapted. She's already battle-tested. She doesn't need development. She needs opportunity. It's not about benching stars or reshuffling everything. It's about balance. When Clark returns, the playbook shouldn't just revert back to her carrying the load. It should incorporate what this game revealed. The team moves better, shoots better, and defends harder when players like Sophie are fully engaged. Because when Sophie is firing on all cylinders, it frees up everyone else. She stretches the floor, relieves pressure, and punishes lazy defensive rotations. She's the player who turns a slow, plodding offense into a modern pace-and-space threat. And if the Fever can't see that, someone else eventually will. That's the real warning for Indiana. In a league where sharpshooting wings with toughness and IQ are a premium asset, Sophie's value is rising by the game. And if the Fever don't recognize what they have right now, they risk watching her walk in, watching another team unlock what they never fully embraced. The future doesn't need to be a mystery. It's standing right there, draining threes, taking hits, and staying locked in through every run. The Fever's turning point isn't down the road, it just happened. The only question now is, will they build around it or waste it? Let's bring it home. Sophie Cunningham didn't just have a great game, she issued a challenge. To her teammates, her coaches, the media, and the league, she showed what happens when heart, skill, and hunger collide, even without the spotlight. While everyone fixed on bigger names and louder narratives, Sophie quietly lit up one of the best teams in the league and made it look effortless. This wasn't luck. This was years of grind, finally breaking through the noise. And if Indiana's smart, they'll stop treating her like a backup plan and start building around the player who just showed them what winning looks like. Because this wasn't just a win, it was a message. Ignore me at your own risk. Sophie Cunningham has arrived on. She's not waiting for permission anymore. The league may keep overlooking her, but after tonight, the fans won't. And that's where real change begins.